We are past the group stage of the Paris Freestyle Chess and now into the quarterfinals. Nodirbek Abdusattorov takes on Magnus Carlsen. What a quarterfinals this is going to be. Best of two classical games, and in case of 1-1 tie we have rapid playoffs and then blitz playoffs. But for now this is the first game and Magnus has the white pieces. Both players pour themselves some water and Magnus will be looking to strike with the white pieces. The position on the board is of course a different one. It's scrambled, the players shake hands, the clock begins 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment per move. You can see that this position has rook, king, knight, bishop, bishop, rook, queen and knight. Let's see what Magnus opens the game with. He plays d4. Not a simple move. He opens up the bishop. Many players also opted for f4 because it opens the bishop as well as the queen. But Magnus feels that d4 is the correct move. Let's see what Nodirbek chooses here. He responds back with f5, which seems like a super logical move, opening the queen, the bishop and also the rook. So that seems like a very logical and a good move to play here. And how does Magnus now build up the position? One of the key elements of freestyle chess is to be able to get all your pieces working together. He plays f3, maybe to play e4, also to get his bishop out to g3 or h4 or maybe to f2. Nodirbek now goes with his pawn to g5, gaining some more space over here and also planning to get his bishop out at some point. Maybe bishop to g6 could be an idea, or to get the knight behind the pawn. Magnus pushes his pawn to e4, grabs space in the center. If you take on e4, I take back and I have a very strong center and I would be very happy. So let's see how Nodirbek continues. He doesn't have to take the pawn at all because his pawn on f5 is defended right now by the rook. He goes for the move knight to g6. The knight comes out, it develops, it's looking at these squares. The position is slowly and steadily developing. Think about it. What would be Magnus's next move? He goes knight to g3, putting pressure on the f5 pawn, forcing black to take a decision. If you push f4, then I can simply come back knight g2 and I have a very strong center here. And so black now brings his knight out to d6. And you will see that Nodirbek is not ready to let go of the tension. He's asking Magnus to push his pawn to e5 when he's ready to move his knight away, maybe to f7 or c4. But Magnus says, I'm not ready to do that. I'm going to play b3. With this move, he takes control of the very important c4 square that is controlled by both the black pieces. And now Nodirbek plays a very nice move. He pushes the pawn in the center with e5. You will see that black's position looks really good. He has got his pieces out. His bishops are ready to develop here. He's also ready to long castle. Everything's looking good. And so Magnus now has to make a tough call whether to take here and allow knight e5 or to push. He pushes the pawn to d5. And now, okay, black can push, but you can also take here, pawn takes, and plonk your knight on the f4 square. It seems like a good idea. He pushes h5. And the idea of this move is very interesting. Because if you take on h5, you are giving up control of the central pawn on e4. So that's the reason why h5 is a very nice move. And Magnus pushes his pawn to c4. And he's Very interesting, because now isn't h4. Oh, if h4, he just wants to take on f5. That's the plan. h4 played by Nodirbek. Very, very interesting moment now, because after knight takes, if you think about it, Magnus has played 7 moves and he has made 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 moves, 5, 6 pawn moves. Incredible. Knight takes pawn, and Nodirbek will most likely also recapture. Knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and we'll reach this position now, and we should take stock of what is going on here. So after pawn takes, oh, he went knight. He doesn't take with the rook. Oh, that's a better move. Knight e7 to take here with the knight. Oh, got it. Magnus brings his knight to e2. And now you just take the pawn on f5. And once that pawn is taken, it's time for us to understand the position more deeply. He takes it. It feels like some sort of a King's Indian where white has the e4 square, so the knight could reroute itself. But on the other hand, black has so much space. His pieces are looking really good. Bishop comes on to c2, attacking here. Now, you can't go knight d4 because you can just take and it loses a pawn. So, he goes d6, and this is a little bit of a safe move. Instead, if you went bishop g6 with the idea of maybe, bishop e7, long castle, it would have been much better. d6 looks like a very natural move, but it just allows white to get the plans that he wants. You can see Magnus long castling here, and castling on the c line, and Nodirbek plays his pawn to b6. Somehow Nodirbek's moves feel a bit slow. Like here, he could already start playing on the queen side with a5, a4, but he plays b6, and Magnus goes h3. A very useful move. It does weaken the g3 square, but you can see that both white pieces are controlling this. You have stopped the g4 break. Now the bishop comes out to g6. Magnus's main idea, of course, is that if he can get his knight to e4. But the problem is, the moment knight moves from e2, the black knight settles down on d4, which is a wonderful square. So for now, Magnus just takes into control the d4 square in all possible manners, with his knight, with his bishop, and he'll see later what to do. Already white seems to be slightly better. You can see how Magnus really grinds this step by step. Bishop comes out to f6 for Nodirbek, and I think somewhere Nodirbek would love to give up this pawn just so that his bishop could be very active on this diagonal. Now Magnus thinking about the next move. He goes rook f to e1. He improves the position of his rook. Maybe wants to go knight c3 to e4. Queen comes up to g7. And now what do you do? Because queen g7, be very careful, e4 is coming up. And so Magnus blocks the pawn first. Bishop e4, a very strong, powerful move, stopping the pawn from advancing. a5, pawn pushes to a5, and the thing is, there could be some potential sacrifices like these, but the queen can always come in between and trade, so it's not feasible, and he wants to play a4 at some point, but for now Magnus stops it with knight to c3. But isn't now knight d4 possible? Because this is where black anyway wanted to put his knight, and we were stopping it with knight to e2. And yes, Nodirbek does play his knight to d4. Very complex middle game, but at the same time, it's very clear that white is the one who's dominating here. The reason for that is after bishop takes bishop, queen takes, which will be played. Now Magnus can place his knight on the e4 square, later take the knight on d4, and then claim that he is better. So yes, knight e4, and now you can see after bishop d4, e d4, and something like rook d3, black's position is very it's like this bishop is bad. That's the problem. So, but when to take on d4 is a good question. You cannot really, you have to time it well. a4 played first, trying to open up, and of course if black gets some counterplay down the a file, he would be more than happy here. He goes b4, keeping the position closed. And now the bishop goes back to g7. Bishop moves back, the rook opens up, and Magnus has to decide his next move. He's bringing his queen, he brings queen f1. And so what he essentially wants to do is he wants to take and bring his queen here. It'll be interesting to see how Nodirbek tries to create play. a3 is a very logical move. He wants to get his rook to a4 and create some trouble down at the b4 pawn. And Magnus now plays his queen to d3. Step by step, he's getting his pieces in better locations. You'll see that the queen was on g1. He spent a time and he got the queen to d3. Now bishop comes out to h6. If white is careless and allows g4, that would be a check. But clearly white can avoid it by simply moving his king away. He first takes on d4. And just so that you understand, g4 is not possible because I can simply come back bishop e3. So he takes back, he takes d4. Of course, taking here would be a terrible mistake because of g4. So he first goes king c2. You can see how Magnus has found a spot for his king on b3. And now the d4 pawn is also a bit weak. Of course, black would be more than what? g4. Wow, what a move here by Nodirbek. That came out of the blue. Which pawn to take back with, f or h? Both look good. He takes back with the f pawn, and Magnus is trying to kind of grasp what is it that Nodirbek wanted. Well, I think Nodirbek just shot castle, just connecting the rooks. The game has become so direct, incredible. He's connected the rooks, and I think what he wants is to just put his bishop on e3. Imagine if you take on d4. It's a good move, but I think he wants to take this diagonal. That's his idea. Rook e2 by Magnus. So now Magnus says to Nodirbek that, hey, you've given me a pawn. All that I have to do is stabilize my position. Rook comes to e8. And now it's putting pressure on the e4 pawn here. The rook comes to e1, defending the e4 pawn. The bishop settles down on the e3 square. Very interesting. There is pressure down here with the queen and the rook. The knight comes back to d2. Wow. So firstly, Magnus is offering a queen trade. Nodirbek declines it. He goes queen f7. And now there are ideas of b5. You have to be careful there. So Magnus pushes his own pawn to b5. He finds time to do this. And in a way, if Magnus gets knight f3 followed by taking the pawn, he should be totally better. And so Nodirbek says, I'm going to take your knight. Even though my bishop is so strong, it's like really rooted in the position, I'm taking off your knight because your knight was going to be better. And so queen takes or king takes is the question. He decides to take back with the queen. And now d3 check somewhere has to be thought of if the queen comes on this diagonal and tries to enter. He takes on e2. Rook takes e2. Takes on e2. Let's see. He comes in queen f1. Whew. Nodirbek here with queen a1, queen b2 ideas. You can't take on d4. Your rook is hanging. So what to do? Has Nodirbek gotten a lot of play? Well, Magnus first gives a check. King goes to h8. I think there is a little bit of a pawn grab that's going to happen here. Yes, he takes on h4 with a check. So now Magnus is 2 pawns up. King g8. And he can bring his queen back. Check. King h8. And you can simply come back to d2 and say that you are up now 2 pawns up. It's also possible to give a few checks. Magnus has 10 minutes on the clock. Nodirbek has 1 minute 51 seconds. He goes queen h6 check. And yeah, king g8 seems like the likely move here. So king g8. And now check. King goes to h8. The Magnus wants to retreat his queen to d3, not back to d2. So he had to make that choice. And there you see him bringing the queen back to d3. Now, these 3 pawns are just going to win the game for white. But the only thing that white has to worry about is this queen. It's entering in and it's creating a mess. It is threatening a check here. And queen takes a3 would be met with rook f1. So you have to be careful about it. But Magnus simply plays king b3 and tells Nodirbek that look, you don't have queen b2 check, my rook controls it. You don't have queen b1 check, my queen controls it. So what is it that you have here? Well, Nodirbek says, I have my rook entering in. Rook f1. Because if check, there is king g7. Another check, there is king f8. And it's not easy for the queen to join in because there is a mating attack that could come here. So instead, he goes rook d2. Calmly threatening this move, queen takes d4 check. The rook comes back to defend the pawn. So rook f4. Can we go like something like g3? Is that even possible? g3. Maybe there's rook e4. What an incredible move. If you take here, there is check, king a4, and it's a draw here. Wow. Okay. So he takes on a3. Magnus finds the best move. King takes a3 on the board. Queen check to c1. Goes. Well, he has to be super careful here. He's playing with his king. King to a4. Isn't it possible to go rook f8 and go from here and try to check? The problem, of course, is that you're going to lose the d4 pawn with a check. Rook e4. What a move here by Nodirbek. If you take here on e4, there is queen takes c4 already with a draw without having to calculate anything. So he goes rook to f2. Magnus plays his rook to f2, and I guess it's still not on the radar to take the rook. The rook is untouchable for the time being. So Nodirbek can improve his position here. Goes rook e3. Oh. But isn't queen d4 just simply losing the pawn? He could take it, but instead he goes rook c2. Oh, things are looking quite intense now. If takes, rook takes c1. Okay, white is winning. He goes queen a1 with just 5 seconds on the clock. Big trouble here. Magnus thinking about queen, where to move the queen, comes back queen d2. And by the way, look at this move, d3. When if you take queen e3, incredible move, queen d1 draws the game. Instead, he plays here, instead of d3, queen b1. And now the question is, can we simply take with a check? Yes, he takes it. The rook is hanging. If you move the king away, I can at the very least take here and be winning. But instead, he first plays rook e5. And Magnus just goes rook e2. A very good move here. Taking advantage of the pin. You can see how Magnus very calmly navigated all the troubles that he was facing in the position. He just made sure not to fall for any of the tricks. That's how good Magnus is when he's switched on. Comes back queen d2. And there you see white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. Black has only 3. So white is a massive 4 pawns up here. Queen f1 played. Again, if you trade on e5, there's queen takes c4. But Magnus is like, I have 4 pawns. I'm ready to give you back 1. Queen takes c4 check. Queen b4 would be met with queen takes a2. So king a3 played. Now d takes e5. The plan is he takes on e5, d takes e5, and here Magnus gave few checks, and then we reach the final position where he moved his king here, and the final moment of the game where he's moved his king to g3, and Nodirbek here is thinking, he stops the clock, resigns. Magnus Carlsen wins the game. He takes 1-0 lead in the quarterfinals. What a game that was by Magnus. Truly, first a little bit of trouble out of the opening, but then once he got control, he simply played one good move after another. Nodirbek tried his best to muddy the waters, and he would have been successful against anyone else in the world. except Magnus. Once Magnus gets a great position, it's very difficult to beat him, and he's still the best player in the world. And here he is trying to prove that in freestyle chess as well he is really good.